Now, another kind of interesting thing about the glucocorticoids is that it decreases or suppresses inflammatory response, so they can use it as medication, as an anti-inflammatory, which is kind of interesting. Now, this one is really kind of a blanket term for several different hormones. The one that's most specific to the cortex and what it does is cortisol. So if you hear cortisol, know that it's a glucocorticotrope, or sorry, glucocortic. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Glucocorticoids. There we go. Cortisol is a type of glucocorticoid. Okay. And again, this is specific to carbohydrates, proteins, and how proteins are reproduced or fat is being stored. Okay. So the next one that we have is mineralocorticoids. There we go. Why did they have to stick the O in there? That just makes no sense. Anyway, so this one is actually going to be affecting the level of electrolytes. And it's going to control sodium reabsorption and potassium secretion by kidneys in the tubules. And the tubules are the little tubes that wrap around with the arteries and veins. The major one for this one is called aldosterone. And yeah, so it's basically stimulating the retention of sodium and water in the kidney filtration. And then it's just to help make sure that we have the proper balance so that we're not getting too little salt or we're not getting too much, all of that fun stuff. And then it's also helping to monitor the blood volume as well. Okay. So the very last one grouping that we have are sex hormones. The biggest one for this one is actually androgen, and this one promotes secondary sex characteristics in men. So, so this might do with hairier, so thicker body hair, that kind of stuff are going to be secondary sex hormones or sex characteristics. All right. So that's in the cortex. Again, those are going to be a lot about metabolic processes dealing with nutrients that are coming into the body. And then sodium and water in the kidneys, and then the sex organs, or sex characteristics. Ooh, there we go. There's some types of pathologies for this guy. First off, we have something called Addison's disease. And this is where you're going to get muscle atrophy, weakness, skin pigmentation, and disturbances in salt and water balance. This is specifically to the adrenal cortex, in where it's not functioning at a high enough level. So remember, in the cortex, sodium and water with aldosterone, carbohydrate, protein, and fat metabolism, and then secondary sex characteristics for men. So that's going to kind of affect all of those different levels. Now, if it's working too well, that's when you're going to get Cushing's disease. This is where you're going to get obesity and a round or moon face. You're going to get your skin is going to be actually pretty thin, and it's going to bruise pretty easily. You're going to get muscle weakness, bone loss, elevated blood sugar. And then you're also going to, if aldosterone is produced too much, again, that one's the one with sodium and water, you're going to get something called aldosteronism. Okay. So that's the adrenals. Not too bad, I don't think. The next ones that we're going to talk about are the pancreas. The pancreas actually does two hormones, and those hormones are exact opposites of each other. So they're sort of like antagonist hormones, you know? So within the pancreas, you're going to have certain cells called the Isles of Langerhans. And these are going to be the cells that actually produce the hormones. So the pancreas is not completely a gland for the endocrine system. It still has some other functions, but they have these specific Isle of Langerhans cells that are the endocrine cells within the pancreas, and those are the ones that are going to be producing the hormones. Now, I mean, the rest of it are basically just going to be producing digestive juices, so that's what they're going to do. So as I mentioned, there's two types of things that they're going to be producing. One of those things is insulin. So insulin, and the whole point of that is that it's actually going to break down glucose levels within the blood. So if your blood sugar level is too high, it's going to break it down. Now, these are all categorized, the two types are categorized by either beta cells or alpha cells. Beta cells are the insulin, okay? And what's going to happen is that the insulin will actually trigger the transport of glucose from the blood sugar across the plasma membrane. So it's going to actually help the body take the glucose out of the bloodstream and put it into the cells, which is pretty important. It's important that our cells actually be able to get the glucose that it needs to act as a fuel. So that's what insulin is going to do. Again, pretty important. Now, if it's an alpha cell, that's when it's going to produce glucagon. This one is, again, kind of the opposite of the insulin, in that it actually causes the liver to release the glucogen within that it's been stored and releases it as glucose into the bloodstream. So if your blood sugar levels drop too low, glucagon will be released, which will then stimulate the liver to release some of the stored stuff so that it can then finally get into the bloodstream and go where it needs to go. And then it's also going to increase the rate that glucose is made from proteins in the liver. There we go. I think I already got that one. So yeah. So I guess in a way, if you need things that are stored to be taken away, you need more glucagon. All right. So that's going to be the pancreas. Again, insulin is our beta cells and glucagon is the alpha cells. Glucagon is going to stimulate the release of glucose from the stored areas, and insulin will take the glucose from the bloodstream and have it cross the plasma membrane into the cells that need the fuel. So obviously the biggest pathology for this one is going to be diabetes. Again, there's two types. The first one is diabetes mellitus, and that one, the type 1 is more severe because that is going to be where the insulin doesn't actually work. So if it's supposed to help cross the insulin from the plasma membranes, it's not, the body doesn't actually respond to the insulin when it's released, and so at that point it's not going to be absorbed. The only thing you can do with this one is control it by diet. If the body will not absorb the glucose levels, then we just need to make sure that there's not enough glucose being introduced into the body to cause problems. Type 2 of diabetes is where you are going to be injecting yourself with insulin. So it's where the aisles of Langerhans are not producing enough of the insulin to work. And so that's where the insulin will come in. Okay. You can have prenatal diabetes. There's actually a name for it. Anyway, where it's specifically that pregnant women will get diabetes. And usually at that point, the most important thing is to increase your exercise levels and increase or decrease your sugar levels in your diet. Okay. So that pretty much does it for the pancreas. And I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop it, and we'll probably introduce just one more video, and then we should be done.